Money for blood can be a controversial practice anywhere in the world, but especially so in Canada. Yet Saskatchewan is set to open the first for-profit plasma donation clinic in the country. The tainted blood scandal of the 1980s looms large over the discussion of paid-for donations after upwards of 30,000 Canadians were infected with HIV and hepatitis C after receiving tainted blood and plasma. And the federal inquiry that followed found that paid blood donations were in part to blame. Since then, the provinces of Ontario and Quebec moved to ban paid donations, and there have been calls to put a federal ban in place. But Saskatchewan says it is going ahead with a paid plasma clinic. Mike McCarthy is a hemophiliac who was infected with hepatitis C during the tainted blood crisis. He's become a vocal advocate for protecting Canada's blood and plasma system, and he's with me in our Toronto studio. Hello.
Good morning, Anna Maria.
I want to get your opinion about for-profit plasma clinics, but let's begin with how you contracted Hep C.
Well, I was born with hemophilia, a bleeding disorder, and it ran in the family, so I had three uncles with it as well. And I grew up taking a concentrate medicine that was collected from many people and put into a medicine, and it was supposed to be a miracle medicine, and it turned out to be a death sentence for my three uncles. And I got hepatitis C that was collected from plasma that was collected from prisoners in Arkansas in 1984. I wasn't told this, but I was told by my physician that if I kept taking this type of product in 84 that I would probably get AIDS and die. And so I stopped taking blood products from 1984 to 1992.
How did that affect
save my
you
life?
as
I
a
got some
hemophiliac?
crippled joints out of it, but I saved my life, and I didn't end dying like many of my friends in the hemophilia community that took this medicine and got HIV.
Roughly how many people did die during the tainted blood scandal?
Well, certainly in the hemophilia community, we've seen upwards of a couple thousand people die from tainted blood, which was 2/3 of our membership in Canada. And probably there's upwards of 30,000 people that were infected by hepatitis C. And the number is unknown, but many thousands have died since getting their infection through the blood system in the 80s.
All these years later, what's wrong with paying people for their plasma?
Well, first of all, there's no shortage for plasma products. There's no crisis of getting access to these blood products that are manufactured in big facilities in Europe and the United States. We have a specific history in Canada where our dirty laundry was aired. We had an inquiry that cost millions of dollars. We had a criminal investigation that led to criminal charges, and there's been billions of dollars paid out in compensation to people harmed through the blood system. And we spent $1 billion renewing Canada's blood system to make it safe again. So our donor base is very fragile. And so paid plasma, which is not known in Canada in terms of being a competing interest in terms of the volunteer blood donor system, this puts Canadians at risk. There's no advantage to setting up a parallel system. And ironically, Health Canada and the Canadian Blood Service is not communicated to the public what type of plan that they will implement to ensure the protection of the volunteer blood system other than passive surveillance. And that's not a plan.
So plasma comes from the blood donors.
Correct.
How do we get plasma now for Canadians?
Well, Canada is self-sufficient for fresh plasma to be used in hospitals for routine procedures that is not imported from the United States. We're self-sufficient. In terms of blood products that are manufactured from plasma that's put into concentrates of thousands of donors, we don't have the scale in order to be self-sufficient in Canada. So what is a bit of a awkward position that puts Canada in that we have to buy our products from the United States. Much of those products are made with plasma collected from Canadians through the volunteer blood system, but some of those products include paid blood donors' plasma and
for-profit clinics in the U.S.
For-profit clinics.
So how confident are you in the plasma being supplied from the U.S.?
Well, they have a sordid past, and they made a business of collecting from the most risky areas of North America at the height of the AIDS crisis, both from the Mexican border, from prisons, as I indicated earlier, and in Skid Row. And so they said that they had learned their lessons from the scandal of the past, and that it was much safer, and that science was foolproof now. And well, I've always heard the science argument that nobody could get infected. As they told us back in the 80s, it was 1 in a million to get AIDS, and it turned out to be 1.1 in 10 people were getting infected with the virus through the blood system. And so, did they learn the lesson when they tried to set up in Ontario? No. Those 3 clinics that were identified by Canadian Plasma Resources, 2 of them were set up in right beside homeless shelters, and the third in Hamilton was set up across the street from a methadone clinic.
So you're saying it's vulnerable people who could have blood issues?
Well, it could be, it's the science that you don't know. And so Justice Creever pointed out, you don't wait for the body count in order to implement safety. Safety is supposed to be paramount. And so in the absence of science, you should collect from the safest areas. And it should be a unified one donor system. And we already pay Canadian blood services $1 billion to ensure that we have integrity and supply in the system in Canada.
Now the Canadian Hemophilia Society actually supports this, but you, and you're a former vice president of that, you are part of a group that does not.
Well, I'm also part of a group that is the chapters of the Canadian Hemophilia Society that went against paid plasma, Ontario and BC, to name 2 provinces.
Right, so now you have a petition. What do you want to see happen next?
Well, this is like whack-a-mole. So, the carpetbagging of blood brokers in Canada, they've gone to virtually every province to find a place to set up their operation, and found one, ironically, in the birthplace of Medicare in Saskatchewan, where everybody else told them no. And so what we do need is, because if they set up in one province, it impacts the integrity of the whole system. We don't know what we don't know, and so it could have a negative impact on security of supply. So we're looking for the federal government to implement a national ban on paid plasma.
Mike McCarthy, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Mike McCarthy is a hemophiliac. He's an activist and a tainted blood survivor. He joined us in our Toronto studio. Well, to help us understand why Canada needs for-profit plasma clinics, to hear his argument, I'm joined by Bahardoust. He is the CEO of Canadian Plasma Resources. He joins me in our Toronto studio. Hello.
Hello, Anna Maria.
So walk us through the process. You have a clinic in Saskatoon. Do you have a license yet?
Not at the moment. We are expecting to receive the license very shortly from Health Canada to distribute our products.
Okay, so if I want to donate plasma, what kind of screening do I go through?
The screening process is similar to a blood donor screening process, although we only use the plasma for further manufacturing into plasma protein products. So the plasma that we collect is not used for direct transfusion into patients, but this screening has multiple layers, and it involves donor filling a questionnaire, then being interviewed by a registered nurse, a physical examination, checking vital signs of the donor to ensure that donation is safe for them, and then taking a sample of blood and plasma from the donor and test it for HIV, hepatitis A, B, C, parvo, B19 virus, and syphilis. We also check the protein composition of the donor to ensure, again, that it is safe for the donor to donate.
How much do you pay a donor?
I will just complete this process. So this has to be repeated twice for the donor to be qualified, the screening process. After they're qualified, the donors, only qualified donors will receive a gift card, a universal gift card that cannot be transferred and cannot be used as cash. They cannot use that to withdraw cash, $25 for each visit.
Okay. Why can't they have cash? What are you trying to guard against?
Well, we want to be compatible with the World Health Organization definition of voluntary non-remunerated donation. And as long as the compensation is proportionate to the time involved and the compensation is non-cash and non-transferable, then by their definition, the process is voluntary and non-remunerated, and that's what we wanted to keep in mind.
Is that also partly because you've been accused of wanting to open places next to methadone clinics, next to places where people are vulnerable, and they'll use the cash? That the argument is you're going to give money to vulnerable people who are drug addicted, and they'll use the cash in that way.
We were accused of that, and I just want to point out that in a debate which is such or so highly emotional, sometimes there is no use for science and evidence, unfortunately. In our case, our processes all have to be approved by Health Canada, and we are regulated by Health Canada, the same body that regulates Canadian Blood Services.
No, fair enough. I'm just asking, why not cash?
Again, as I mentioned to you, we wanted to be use a definition which is compatible with the World Health Organization's definition of voluntary non-remunerated donation,
Okay.
and to avoid any controversy, as you mentioned.
Okay, so you actually have a clinic in Saskatchewan right now that is actually taking plasma donations in a pilot project, do you not?
Yes. Yeah.
What are you doing with that plasma?
That plasma actually cannot be used for further manufacturing because we have not received our Health Canada license and the license number for that specific center, although we were licensed in Ontario in 2014. So the plasma that we collect can only be used for research purposes or has to be discarded at the conclusion of the pilot.
Until you get your full license.
Yes.
And how far away are you from that?
We are at the final stages. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly when we will receive the license, but it will be very soon, but we don't have a date.
Days or months? Weeks?
It would be probably days or weeks.
Okay. Canada has a plasma supply issue. Volunteer donations do not cover our existing plasma needs. Will your clinic help? Will you be putting that plasma back into the Canadian system?
Yes, this is a highly regulated industry. So the plasma that is collected in Canada, and if we are licensed by Health Canada, we can only distribute this plasma in Canada. And Canada currently relies heavily on other jurisdictions and specifically on the United States. Up to 80% of our IVIG is manufactured from paid donors in the United States. Although, as Mr. McCarthy pointed out, we are self-sufficient in fresh blood products and fresh frozen plasma. That need is something on the order of only 50,000 liters of plasma, and demand for fresh frozen plasma is actually going down. But to meet the demand for plasma protein products, we need something on the order of 1,250,000 liters of plasma, and we are collecting about only 20% of that through the efforts of Canadian Blood Services and Hema-Quebec. So there is a very large gap that needs to be filled in here.
Once you get the plasma, do you sell it to the U.S. companies that make the products?
We are in the final stages of negotiating a contract where we supply the plasma to a fractionator and we will get IVIG.
IVIG means?
Intravenous immunoglobulin.
Okay, you supply it to a who?
This product is used for a variety of disorders such as, for example, primary immune deficiency. It's for immune deficiencies in general.
Right, but you supply it to who? You called it a
fractionator.
A fractionator?
A fractionator takes our plasma and separates the proteins and produces what is generally called plasma protein products.
Right, so that people can use like hemophiliacs and others.
For example.
And so where is the fractionator?
The fractionator is based in the United States.
Okay, so you're going to take Canadian plasma, you're going to sell it to the States, and then they're going to sell it back to us?
Yes, we will. Well, it will be a contract manufacturing, similar way that CBS and Hema-Quebec are dealing with the plasma that they have through the recovered plasma that they have from their whole blood operations. Because at the moment there is no fractionation capability in Canada. Fortunately, hopefully in the near future things will change. We know that the Korean Green Cross is setting up a fractionation plant in Quebec, and if we reach our targets for plasma collection, we are hoping to also set up a fractionation plant in Western Canada as well.
Have you approached any other provinces about opening for-profit plasma clinics?
Yes, we have, and we have received confirmation from several other provinces that we are welcome to open plasma collection centers in their jurisdictions.
Can you tell me where?
British Columbia, Manitoba, which already has the same system in place for the last 30 years, the only province in Canada which has one plasma collection center is operating in Winnipeg called CanGene, New Brunswick, and obviously Saskatchewan. And we had
so what do you think of this
from Alberta.
And Alberta as well.
But that was from the previous government, so we'll reach out to them when if we plan to move to that province in the future.
So the fact that you can't operate in Ontario is not that much of a hindrance to you?
Not really, no.
Okay, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
That is Barzine Bahardoust. He is the CEO of Canadian Plasma Resources, and he joined me in our Toronto studio. Well, Saskatchewan is not the first province in which Canadian Plasma Resources tried to set up for-profit clinics. The company tried to open clinics in Ontario until the province passed legislation forbidding companies from paying people for their plasma. That was in 2014. To find out why Saskatchewan thinks for-profit plasma clinics are right for that province, I'm joined by the province's health minister, Dustin Duncan. He is in Regina. Hi, Mr. Duncan.
Good morning, Anna Maria.
Well, okay, so Ontario said no. Why has Saskatchewan said yes?
We basically said that we had no plans in place to put in legislation that would ban the practice, in large part because the Canadian plasma system is already heavily reliant on procuring plasma from paid donors. It just happens to be that they're largely in the United States or in some European countries. So your previous guests had talked about the gap between supply and demand in Canada. Only about 20% of our plasma needs are actually supplied by Canadians. So 80% of our plasma-based protein products, like the drugs used to fight cancer and other illnesses, already comes from paid donors. They just happen to live in another country. Canadian Blood Services, in fact, Justice Creever even put this in his report, that Canada needs to become self-sufficient or more self-sufficient, but at only 20%, we're certainly a long ways away from that. And you know, I certainly believe that a dual system is one way to increase our sufficiency levels.
How do we become self-sufficient if, in fact, we're sending it to the States to be in those places where they mix it up with everybody else's plasma?
Well, I think that because we're only at 20% in terms of the supply coming from Canadians, it makes it difficult to have a fractionation plant here in Canada. I think that if and when the supply numbers do increase, then there may be a day when that actually happens. But to this point, we are already heavily reliant on the American system for plasma and plasma protein products that are manufactured in the United States. But we do certainly need to, we may never get to 100%. In fact, at the most recent meeting that I attended with Canadian Blood Services, they agree that 100% is probably not likely for Canada, but certainly 20% is not acceptable. And the fact that we are so heavily reliant on largely the United States, it really does become a security of supply issue. If there was ever to be any situation in the United States that would severely impact the supply coming into Canada, certainly our patients would, I guess, in a way, take back seat to American patients, and that could pose a real...
Well, wouldn't they anyway then? If we send our plasma there and the United States wants to hang on to it, they could then.
Right, and so the current system as it's operating right now, we are able to procure plasma-based products from the United States, but again, because of the derivative, the product that is derived from paid donors, the plasma product that then goes into making, protein-based products and cancer drugs.
So let me ask you: is this a health issue?
80% of that is already coming from people
no,
that
I
are
understand
being
that.
paid for their product.
I understand that. Is this a health issue for you, or is this an economic issue?
No. It's for me. It's a health issue. Because we are so reliant on other people in other countries for our plasma-based products. It really becomes a supply issue. So security of the supply, and it really speaks to the fact that only 20% of Canadians' demand for plasma protein products are actually satisfied by Canadians that are donating. And that has been through an altruistic system, which, I think separate this out from the blood system. The blood system is, we're fully reliant upon an altruistic system, and nothing, I think, is going to change that. But it hasn't been the same way on the plasma system. We are heavily reliant on a paid donor system. It just happens to be the people that are getting paid are not Canadians. So we need to change that imbalance and raise that up, and it might be going from 20% to 40 or even 50%, but that's a lot better than 20% where we're at now. What we've been able to achieve through the altruistic system.
Dustin Duncan, thank you for your perspective.
Okay, thank you.
That is Dustin Duncan. He's Saskatchewan's health minister, and we reached him in Regina.